guys, it's Ryan Fowler and Teresa K with InnerMasculine and InnerFeminine Live. Teresa joins me every Friday. She is the InnerFeminine to the InnerMasculine. And today we are going to talk about generational trauma, what it is. The last 2 days we've been talking about how subconscious trauma gets stored in our body. It can affect us physiologically, behaviorally, psychologically, etc. throughout our lives. Trauma formed in childhood can stay with people the rest of their lives. It often does. Now we're going to talk about generational trauma. Teresa's a bit of an expert on that, so she's going to be talking about that. And then we are going to discuss how we actually get this trauma out. What do we replace it with? I mentioned at the end of the show, someone had a question on, well, what do you put in? What kind of beliefs do you put in? We're going to dive into that more deeply. But Teresa, welcome to the show. And maybe you can start off with, you introduced yourself before, but start off with what is generational trauma and how does that affect us?
Ryan, so happy to be here. As always, I so much enjoy our time together and are exploring all things subconscious in terms of releasing trauma, releasing old programming that has not served us, reprogramming our subconscious so that we can consciously and subconsciously live better lives. And as you know, and as we've discussed, I have actually, I'm a financial wealth strategist. I've been working with money for a very, very long time.
And you're a very good one.
and yes, and as a business owner, I've explored ways of releasing old programming so that I could achieve more in my business and in my life. And in my studies and in my understanding of old programming, so much of our old programming isn't necessarily ours. Certainly, we've got our own programming from our own childhood. Yeah. And there's a beautiful book. It's one of my favorite books. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. It's by Bessel van der Kolk.
2 days ago, I did a show on that.
Right. And it's the brain, mind, and body in the healing of trauma. And basically, the author discusses the need to address trauma in order to release old programming. Mm-hmm. And there are many, many, many different methodologies in the book of releasing trauma. But the basic premise is that our body keeps that trauma, holds on to that trauma. And Ryan, maybe this would be a great opportunity for you to go into the technical, as you do so beautifully, on what the relationship between the body, the feelings, the trauma, and our belief system and our programming. If you could address that real quick, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So just to give you an example, for if you guys want to look this up so that you know this isn't just woo. I mean, everything I do because it works. And there's a lot of science to back this up. My criticism of the mainstream, mental health community is they don't use a lot of the new science, or they don't know how to incorporate it into their strategies, their methodologies that have been around for 70 years, for example. But you can go online, you can Google Our Second Brain. And this has been known about for a while. This is, mainstream science. You can find articles by Johns Hopkins University, etc. We have, and this is just one aspect of our body actually processing data, storing emotion, etc. So we have a mass of nerves and neurons in our gut that act as a second brain. They work differently than the brain up here, but they are processing data. The mass of nerves and neurons in your gut has about the same amount of nerves and neurons in a cat's brain. But if you look at all the nerves and neurons stored throughout our torso, you have just as many neurons processing in your torso as you have up here. So why do some methodologies only focus on this? It doesn't make any sense. You're missing half the neurons. There is a show on Netflix called Human, And it's 7 episodes. It talks about different aspects of the human body and how amazing and complicated the human body is. There's the episode on our heart and circulatory system. They mention in that episode that there are neurons on your heart. These are brain cells on your heart. This isn't conjecture. They found it. It's there. So when you have a heavy feeling in your heart, guess what? There's neurons there giving you that emotion. We have neurons throughout our body, and there is a concentration in the torso, especially the gut. But there are nerves and neurons throughout our body. So when you have a gut feeling, when you have a heavy heart, when you have a tightness in your throat, the hairs on the back of your neck, guess what? That is where these neurons are that are processing that emotion and giving that to you. And emotion that is painful emotions tied to subconscious trauma, it's stored there. You have biochemical changes in these neurons. So it's I think there's a spiritual dimension to things. I think there's, psychological, spiritual, physiological, it's all connected. So I was mentioning the other day, there's a guy named Alex Hormozi, brilliant businessman. And I think my second show I did here, there is a client of mine became a hypnotherapist, and we picked apart his clip, and he said, well, trauma, it's really just because you have a belief. You can just decide to have a different belief, and then it leaves. You could just say, hey, screw this. I'm going to believe this instead. You only have trauma because your society tells you should, and your culture tells you should or shouldn't, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not true. There are actually physiological changes in your body because of trauma you've had. And that's what I've been showing the science on that in the last 2 episodes of this show. So you can't just say, oh, I'm going to think differently now and everything's better. I mentioned in the last show, Andrew Tate got a lot of flack for saying depression isn't real. It's like, really? Well, why is your body physiologically different from trauma? So, and it's not just physiological. Like I said, I think everything's connected. I personally believe there's a spiritual component. There's absolutely a behavioral, psychological component. There's also, there's a cognitive component, and there's also a physiological component where these neurons are actually, structured according to the subconscious beliefs you have, and that there are physiological changes throughout your body. If you have painful subconscious trauma, and what's interesting is with hypnosis and some of the other techniques. Now, Teresa, what I find really interesting about Teresa is Teresa, like me, we've had our traumas and we've overcome them. So we're intimately aware with these techniques because we've used them on ourselves and fixed ourselves. And Teresa, you have become very successful, but also you're just, a kind, decent, and I think a generally happy and authentic human being. I think you're that way because you've done a lot of self-work. Would you agree?
Thank you for the compliment. And it's certainly a work in progress. And I have done a lot of work. And for every level, there's another devil. And
yes, new levels, new devils. You're at a pretty high level, though.
and there's still room for growth. There's always room for growth, or we're dead, right? Who wants to just malinger and just maintain? I believe entropy. If you look at the definition of entropy, right, and actually, I love looking up definitions of words, and I'm going to look up the definition and give the official definition of entropy. It says it's a thermodynamic quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work. Not the definition I wanted.
What does that mean?
Right. For me,
I think that just went over everyone's head.
Right. All right. Teresa's meaning of the word entropy. Look, things are going to break down. Systems will break down if you're just maintaining. If you don't get ahead of systems, you will break down and work backwards. So maintaining is not good enough. Think about a car. if you're not maintaining a car, what's going to happen to the car, right? It's going to stop working eventually. If you're not maintaining your body, right, it's going to absolutely break down. But if you want to stay ahead, of the curve, if you want to get stronger, you can't just maintain, because as you age, there's a breakdown in the system. So I think it's the same thing when it comes to subconscious programming, and it comes to achievement, and it comes to living the best life possible. It's not just maintaining the status quo. Life comes at you fast. Crap happens every single day. If we're just maintaining, we are moving backwards. And I have no interest in maintaining.
Well, and you see this happen all the time. You see very successful people who have trauma in them and they never address it. And they become, extreme cases, Robin Williams, Kurt Cobain, Marilyn Monroe, etc. That Chris Farley, that wonderful comedian, and he had his addictions and stuff, eventually did them in, because he didn't address them and he didn't up level. And it's not just maintaining, it's let's progress.
Yeah, let's progress. Yeah. And I think these gentlemen who talk about, depression, there's no such thing as depression, or, trauma is just a social construct, my words, not theirs. I think they have figured out success and finances at the expense of cutting off emotions.
Yep.
I think the goal is to have full range and access to all emotions. There is a purpose for every single emotion. I don't believe God just, wanted us to be happy all the time, or God wanted us to achieve. Like, there is a place for rage. There's a place for anger and sadness and
there's
grief.
A place for anxiety. Sometimes it's appropriate. Anxiety has helped me avoid danger in the past. It's like
absolutely. Danger. And excitement and joy and playfulness. And if you look at, there's a wheel of emotions. If you Google it, there are 100 at least, if not hundreds of words in the English language to describe the whole range of emotions. And, there was a time in my life where I think I just had access to a couple emotions, because it was really scary to feel all the emotions, and I was blocked from those emotions. And all the work that I've done has helped me to expand my range of emotions. And you better believe there's a place for rage and there's a place for anger, which I really didn't have access to that at one point. And now I do. Yeah. And it's used and it's felt in a very productive way.
Yeah, don't piss Teresa off.
And I do get mad, and nobody's ever in the history of those who know me can say I've lost it, because it's just not something I do. Can I feel rage? Can I feel anger? Can I feel grief and sadness and all of these emotions today? Absolutely. And I could tell you that was not the case before.
Oh, very, very interesting. So, I do believe when we have trauma and bad subconscious programs, our emotions are misfiring. They're not serving us. They're making us behave dysfunctionally in order to cope with the trauma. Would you agree that when you get the more you get your inner world right, because I don't think anyone's at 100%. Like, now I've been doing this on myself for 10 and a half years, and I'm thinking, I have 2 or 3 bad programs. They're not huge. They're kind of, they're way smaller than the old ones that are completely gone. But I say, there's still 2 or 3 I need to work on, like 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10. But the more we get our inner world right, I think the more our emotions serve us, especially when we're connected to them and understand them. Would you agree with that?
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll go back to talking about The Body Keeps the Score at the book. And if you haven't, the audience, if you haven't looked at the book or read the book, highly recommend it.
Technical book, but great book.
It's a technical book, but you get the flavor of the book. And it's a psychiatrist who has published over 150 peer-reviewed studies, very, very well referenced, documented, researched information in the book. And it was, over 30, 40 years of practice as a psychiatrist, working with all sorts of clients who had, and patients who had, who were war veterans, who had survived horrific horrific trauma, and made the connection that the body is storing the trauma. So mentally, you might think, oh, I don't remember the trauma. I don't remember what happened. And in certain types of treatments and therapy, the body starts to release trauma because it's reliving the trauma.
And that's what I do, and you've done that with hypnosis too. People, we bring that trauma in their body to the surface and literally release it, and then it's gone. Yeah.
Yes. And Ryan, your methodology is one way of getting to it. There are physical, like massage. People release stuff during massage, deep tissue massage. There's rolfing. There's all sorts of different medicines that can be used during massage to get into the body to release stuff, right? And the body starts to shake. You see the response of animals when they're traumatized. They process trauma differently than humans do because we have a bigger brain than animals. But when an animal is traumatized and they're just sitting there shaking for a while, right? And then they walk it off.
Yeah, and then they're good. Well, they can still, like, I've seen dogs that were abused and they can carry that for a while. Yeah.
Yes. But animals out in the wild, right? They'll shake and they'll shake off the trauma and then they move on.
Go on.
Do they remember? Probably, right? I don't know. But there are therapies that help shake off, release trauma from the body. Yeah. And you're watching people, and there's tons of YouTube videos on this, and you watch people literally shake off their trauma. Yeah. Fascinating. Now, with all that being said, I know you wanted to talk about generational trauma.
Yeah, I had that. I was going to ask you. I'm like, let's get back to generational trauma. How's that tie into everything?
Well, so let's look at the sins of the father. Let's just, at a high level, right? What did the Bible mean by sins of the father? I believe Teresa's interpretation, and it might be blasphemous, I don't know, but this is my understanding of the world. The sins of the father mean that the sins of generations, I also believe trauma from previous generations are embedded in our DNA and passed on from generation to generation.
And is this epigenetic, genetic, both, either?
I believe so. I'm not the technical one between the two of us. You're certainly more technical. I'm big picture, but I think certain trauma can trigger an expression of old generational trauma.
Yeah, and I've had clients. We talk about their childhood and their parents are messed up. And then we, to help them forgive their parents, say, hey, hurt people. Do you understand? Your parents were hurting and had their own trauma. And then they talk about, oh, yeah, I know my grandma did a huge number and, passed trauma down to my parents who are then passing it to me. And, I have clients where they even knew their great-grandparents. And the great-grandparents had trauma, and it's just getting passed down through generation. So do you think it's genetic? Is it, behavioral? Each child is growing up being raised by a traumatized parent. What are the mechanics? How is it passed down? Is it just stored in the DNA? And maybe tell us more about that. And then also, how do we resolve that?
All of the above. I think it's passed down through hormones, genetics, behavior, mental, psychological, psychic, spiritual. I think it's absolutely passed down all different ways. And certain events in our lives can turn on a past trauma, a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all, we're born from, why are some people's personality, we see personality traits in families. Oh, you're just like your grandfather. Oh, you're just like your uncle, and how you deal with anger, you deal with sadness or depression. from a genetics perspective,
and you may not even have much exposure to that uncle or grandparent. It just is there.
Right. Culturally, right? I think ancestral culture, culture, right? I love playing with words. I think there are certain cultures that have certain personality traits, certain spiritual traits, certain traumatic traits from, their history as a group. I think most of us, and I know I don't come from a victim mentality at all. So when I speak about this, I'm not speaking to excuse behavior or from a victim perspective. I'm speaking from, hey, let's be aware of this. It helps understand and explain so much. Now that you've got the intelligence, what are you going to do with it? But I believe most of us are walking around wounded and traumatized.
I think it's 90% have, I'm based on studies I've read about codependency. There was this one study, 90% of the patient sample had at least mild codependency. Well, where there's codependency, there's toxic shame. It's 90% of the sample size, random sample size. There was another university, it was like 320 of their students, 50% had moderate to severe codependency. Half of the sample population had moderate to severe codependency. That's crazy. And yesterday, we were examining the scientists talking about how common trauma was. And they had a list of 10 things that can traumatize, like an alcoholic parent, a parent who was in jail, physical violence, not just spanking, but like heavy duty physical violence, sexual molestation, whatever, all the list of 10 things. And they found out that 1 in 11 people had 6 or more of the 10. 9% of our population had 6. Just 1 is going to really mess you up. 9% had 6. How many have at least 1? It's crazy.
What percentage had 6?
1 out of 11, so about 9% had 6 out of 10 severe. 6 severe. Yeah, any one of these things, like being molested as a child, that'll mess you up. Being beaten as a child, that'll mess you up. 9% had 6 out of 10.
That's crazy. Incredible. And you've got to think, if you're physically abused, you don't think there's going to be emotional abuse? Just consider, forget the word abuse, right? If as a child, you didn't feel understood emotionally, heard emotionally, held emotionally, allowed to express your feelings.
Neglect.
Emotional neglect. I'm not going to call that abuse. Let's forget the label. Just say from an emotional perspective, you didn't feel loved or understood. That does something to your psyche. That does something to your programming. So if I don't feel understood, I don't feel loved, and not always necessarily, but at times, and I make that connection. At this moment, I'm not feeling loved, or at this moment, someone made fun of me because of how I looked at school. And that made an imprint, and I made a connection with that feeling and a belief. That's a programming that can be reprogrammed and healed. So just living in this world as a young child, you're going to have experiences that imprint that, unless you are, I don't know, completely blocked, right? And there are, I think there are probably kids that are completely blocked and insensitive and they're not impacted by other people's thoughts. I don't know if that child exists, but let's pretend it does.
I don't know if it exists either. I haven't met that child, but
things are going to impact you.
Well, as children, our brains are designed as children to suck everything around us to figure out how the world works. So I don't know how a child can block that when their brain is physiologically designed for, especially the first 8 years, to take everything in and figure stuff out. If you're getting all this traumatic stuff around you, how's that not going to affect you when you're designed to take it in?
Right.
The brain is, yeah.
And the relationship between the child and the parent and parents and caregivers and the messages that the caregivers are giving to the child. There's no parent that could be perfect 100% of the time and meet the child's needs 100% of the time. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So is
a lot of parents are trying
trauma?
their best, but they got their trauma. Maybe they have to just work to survive and they're never at home because they're working just to put food on the table and feed the kid and themselves. You know, it could still traumatize the kid because the parents aren't there.
Exactly. And most parents unconsciously parent. Some parents will say, I hated that my parents parented me this way, so I'm going to do the exact opposite.
And that causes trauma by doing the opposite. You go too far to the other end.
You go too far to the other end. And some parents will say, I'm going to do exactly what my parents do unconsciously because they don't know any better. Both ways are not serving the child's needs because they're not consciously parenting. They're parenting in reaction to their parenting, not giving what the child needs. So at the end of the day, look, we've got, it's 2023. How amazing that we've got technology, we've got information, we've got so much data and so much from a societal perspective focus on healing. I like to focus on healing and not blaming, right?
Yeah.
How cool that we have all of this.
Yep.
That we're able to release so that we can live the most amazing life possible for us.
Yeah, awesome. Very good. There is one thing I want to point out, talking about generational trauma. You have a parent passing trauma to their kid, and that child passes trauma to their child, and that child passes trauma to their child. And you see this bloodline with woundedness and suffering in it. But if any one person in that bloodline up levels, heals their crap, gets their inner world right, finds that peace and serenity, heals the trauma, now that bloodline can flow clearer for how many generations?
Wow.
That's real. That is real nobility. That's nobility.
I understand that from a quantum perspective, a quantum energy perspective, right? And I'm gonna take some license with my understanding of the experiments. If they take my DNA, let's say my spit, and they put it in a vial and it goes to Russia, and I'm here looking at a video and it's traumatizing and it's impacting me, they have done the experiments to show that vial with my DNA is impacted, right?
Yeah.
So it changes.
It's kind of like quantum entanglement, right?
That's exactly what it is. It's quantum entanglement.
You have two entangled atoms, and you can, no matter how far apart they are, when one changes, the other changes in a like manner.
Changes. So imagine
that's not woohoo. That's science.
That's science. I'm going to throw a little bit of woo-woo because this is my interpretation of the science. Okay. When we do our healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's quantum entanglement, why isn't there healing for all of our ancestors as well before us from a DNA perspective? And why isn't there healing for those that we are entangled with in our lives today, including our parents and our children, those who are alive with us? And I would say our partners who we're sharing DNA with, right? Because that's sex, that's kissing, right?
Yeah.
And it impacts the future as well. Our future DNA, our future, children. So I love this conversation.
Yeah.
And it is so encouraging for someone who's in the middle of doing this work and being in pain and being in that cloud that you can be in when you're doing the work and say, wow, there's a greater purpose. I'm not doing this just for myself. I'm doing this for others as well.
Yeah. Melanie Tonya Evans, right?
Yes.
That's her program that I took that opened me to this world and heal my manic depression, etc. She said that her son was in a very bad place. And she was, very concerned for her son's health, son's life. She thought she would lose him. And what she did is she found certain parts in her to heal. And when she healed these parts, I guess, I can't remember the whole story, but she said when she healed these parts, so she was no longer obsessing over controlling him, manipulating, getting him to do things, but now she healed her healthy aspects, I guess, that were making her treat him that way, that 3 weeks later, he healed his stuff and saved himself. So her, by saving her and healing these aspects that caused her to have maybe a toxic relationship with him, and healing that, and then he healed. And her point was, because I healed, that's what helped him heal, but I worked on myself. And I don't understand the mechanics of that, but you maybe understand it more than me. But it is interesting. I mean, really, we can't force other people to up level or change, but the most influence we can have on others is to heal ourselves. And when they see the healing in us, or maybe through some other aspect of what we're doing, that I've noticed has the biggest influence on helping others, is we heal ourselves. Does that make sense?
Oh, for me, it makes absolute sense. And I love that story. And, be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly.
Especially with family and those you share DNA with. They've done, there's super cool videos on YouTube with the metronomes that are all out of sync, right?
And they align, yeah.
And they then become aligned. I don't know. I think from a quantum entanglement perspective, from a sharing a DNA perspective, when we change ourselves, it starts to resonate with others. And I think absolutely, without a doubt, it's just something that I believe, even though I can't articulate the science, that it absolutely can have that impact. If for no other reason, when we show up differently, don't other people show up differently?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing else. Keeping it super simple.
Well, there's one study I want to mention. You got to Google the study. I'm sure it'll come up if you Google it. I believe they did a study on these this college sorority, or girls in a college dorm, and over time their menstrual cycles aligned. So after several months, all their menstrual cycles were on the same timeline. Yeah. Weird, but it happened. They've done studies on it. It's like, what the hell?
It's resonance. That's resonance from proximity, right? But because of quantum physics, how we understand quantum entanglement, you don't have to be in physical proximity to affect the DNA of someone you share DNA with.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Another resource I would look at, which is fascinating, is heart math.
Never. I think I've heard of that once. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah, heart math has been around probably 30 years. I had in my old DOS computer, just an old, or maybe it was Windows 95, an old version of my computer. I had the first software program of heart math going back a long time. Maybe it was.
And what is heart math?
Heart math is, they've gamified going into your heart and tapping into the intelligence of the heart and seeking resonance with your heart and other people's hearts. So
give us an example of how that works.
Well, so they've gamified it. There's a little program. You can actually use it on your iPhone now. And in fact, I've got mine right here.
Nice.
And there's just a little attachment that you put in your ear, and the application on your phone, what they've done is basically gamify going into a specific place. It's not meditation. It's just getting into a place in your heart where you're not in a stress mode. Mm-hmm. You're just tapping into a calm, safe place.
Okay.
And by you tapping into that calm, safe place, you can impact people around you. You can impact, they've done all sorts of studies, even with meditation, when people go into a meditative state, the vibration, the resonance is impacted. It's a very cool thing.
Well, you can see this in groups. Like if there's some stressful event and there's one guy who stays calm, it kind of calms everyone else down. You know what I mean?
Yes.
People are freaking out, and this one guy or woman or whatever is saying, hey, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We're going to do this. And this person remains calm. Everyone else calms down.
So I Googled what is heart math, and it says it's a system of simple and powerful self-regulation techniques, which are easy to learn and designed to be used in the moment, no matter the situation.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Okay. So, you've used now, see, with me, I have stuck with, I've learned a lot of different hypnosis techniques, and then I work with self-talk, cognitive stuff as well, because it's also important. It's just, I know I kind of give cognitive behavioral therapy some crap because, yesterday I showed 2 days ago, I showed this study that admitted that for treating mild to moderate depression, the gold standard of cognitive behavioral therapy was at most 50% of patients responded to just people with just mild, moderate depression at most. It doesn't mean they got all better. It means they got at least a little better, at most half. The other half, no impact. And I don't want to say that CBT is bad. I'm saying that it's incomplete because it only deals with one aspect of who we are. You're cognitive. I do think it has its place. So, I use some of those techniques, reframing, other things like that. But I've stayed more in the camp of, cognitive, hypnosis, subconscious, dealing with that, although I'm a fan of EMDR and psychedelics as well. I haven't taken psychedelics, but I've seen clients who have benefited from it. You've used a broader spectrum of methodologies. Can you tell us about maybe what you've done and you have done some healing methodologies for others, but you focus much more on yourself. Can you maybe tell us about how you've, I think it's a given. We all have trauma. So you've had trauma. How have you released the trauma and up-leveled yourself? What's your process been? If you don't mind sharing, I think you're okay with that.
No, not at all. I operate.
We have this trauma. How do we fix it? That's
right.
what I'd like to go to.
I personally operate very intuitively. When I was younger and I didn't have access to my intuition as strongly as I do today, I started with cognitive behavior therapy because that was really all I knew way back then, right?
Yeah. And it does help. It's slow, but it helps. It does.
It's slow. It helps. There's an absolute place for it. I think having a safe place to share thoughts and feelings and to know you're not alone. That was, I did a lot of reading. So I learned, and this was at 16 when I got my license. I went to the bookstore and just started learning so much about family dynamics and dysfunctional families and just so many things. And that gave me an awareness that, oh my gosh, what I was going through and what I was feeling, I was not alone. And that was probably the first thing that helped me so much was I'm not the only one. I'm not alone. In fact, so many of us are walking around wounded.
Yeah.
And then there was traditional therapy. And then I worked with a hypnotherapist. And then just intuitively, as all these different types of modalities and technology came into play, remember, I'm older than you and was around.
Are you? No way.
I am. And I'm around before tapping was around, right? And so I learned tapping and emotional freedom technique and variations of emotional freedom technique and EMDR and all these different modalities and technology. And since I really was into it, I loved learning about them and just intuitively, okay, I'm going to use this for a while. And then, you know what? I don't need it anymore. I'm in a good place. And then I learned about something else and explored that.
So as you go deeper, you're finding new levels of trauma.
New levels,
and that's
new
the layers
levels.
of onion I tell people about.
That's
But
exactly
each
right.
time you get rid of something, it's gone forever and your life is permanently better. Would you agree? It doesn't mean you've cured everything. It means your life is better. It's like, I used to struggle with this. It's not a struggle anymore. Now I'm kicking ass. Here's this other thing I need to up level, but this part is fixed. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I'm about growth and I'm about learning. And when you're constantly trying to up level, it is going to at the same time expose a deeper level, a peeling off the onion of something that needs to be resolved. Because where I am right now, where you are right now, Ryan, where you, the audience, is right now, you are there because you've reached your level. Otherwise, you'd be somewhere else. Where you are today is the direct result of your subconscious programming and what you've released. Otherwise, you'd be in a different place.
That's right. And if you stay at this level, the things you struggle with, you'll continue to struggle with for the rest of your life. If you get to the next level up, your life improves inwardly, but then in some way it improves outwardly too. And guys, Teresa is a very successful lady. She's kicking ass in life. You are kicking ass in life. You're doing great. You look great. You're in good shape. You're financially successful. You have a great relationship with your son. You're doing awesome in many ways. Doesn't mean your life is perfect, but there are outward manifestations of the inner work that you've done. Same thing for me. I'm living my dream. I'm here in Mexico City. I'll be in Cancun. I'll be in Costa Rica. I'm doing cool shit. I'm, successful, happy, getting the things I want, with relationships, loves. I have the best friends. I used to have toxic friends. I used to be bullied. I don't have any of that crap in my life. I have fantastic friends, fantastic relationships, feel good. It doesn't mean my life is perfect. Doesn't mean there aren't struggles. But the more you up level, the more you head in this direction of realizing your dream life, but also, generally speaking, I'm not saying we're happy all the time. That's not how life's meant to be. But generally speaking, our inner world as well as the outer world improves. And that's what we're trying to do now, is show people the way, because it's worked so well for us. And we've seen it work so well for others too.
Yes. And 3 years ago, I think, Ryan, the person who you were back then couldn't have imagined the life that you're living today and the value that you're bringing people at the level that you're bringing that value. I think you were more focused on one-on-one, and now you're focused on one-to-many. And that was
I'm still doing one-on-one, but I'm working with three very successful people. You're one of them, to take this to the next level. And we have the knowledge, we have the skill. It's just a matter of time. It really is. I mean, this is going to get freaking huge. How quickly or the exact way that'll happen, it's not clear and not completely defined, but we have a path and direction. We know we're going to get there.
And the one thing I would add to everything that you've said is that there is a place for rest, and there's a place for integrating a new level.
Yeah, it's okay to plateau for a bit while you're just getting everything settled in. Your new reality, your new programs internally. Yeah.
It's about having that connection and conversation with your higher self, with your intuition. All right, where am I right now? Do I need rest? Do I need to maintain? Do I need to focus on, my relationships, or on changing where I live? Like, it's about having that connection with your higher self. And for me, God, right? What is the highest and best place for me to be, from a spiritual perspective, from an emotional perspective, from a physical perspective? Like, what's next for me? And sometimes what's next is to do nothing at all, right? Just to maintain.
Yeah. So you've used a lot of different methodologies. We talked before the show, and you said there's some underlying concepts that are the same through each one. Is that correct? So maybe some underlying principles that each successful methodology uses, like some overlap between them. What would you say those are?
So I think it goes back to, look, I think trauma, hurts, experiences leave imprints in our psyche, programming that impacts our beliefs, and that impacts our outside world, right? So how do you release those imprints? How do you release that programming? How do you release those feelings, the emotions, the beliefs in order to have a different outcome? I think that is, generally speaking, in my words, this whole process that we're talking about, distilled to its most basic level. Is there one methodology to release the feelings, beliefs, imprints, templates? No, of course not. There are many, right? And what may work for one may not work for another. But I think most of them have the basic methodology, or the basic science, the basic process to release.
And I would say uncover.
To uncover. And it's not necessarily conscious. I think a lot of this work is done unconsciously. You don't need to remember or have conscious awareness of the imprints or the beliefs or the trauma or the memories in order to release.
So you can access this trauma working with the body physiologically, working with emotions, intuition, to a point cognitive. But at the end of the day, you're working on trauma in the body, belief systems tied to the trauma, and trauma with emotions, intuition, anything else. We have intuition, emotions, and trauma in your body. Subconscious, cognitive, but kind of these systems kind of one way or another get to all of that.
Right.
They're not just focusing on, oh, what do you think? What are you saying to yourself? What's your mental model? They're not just focusing on that. They are focusing on the trauma, the emotions stuck in the body, and getting that unstuck.
I love the picture of
and the belief system tied to them. I think every negative trapped trauma has an emotion and a belief.
I agree. And I love the image of the iceberg, right?
Yeah.
The conscious is just, the tip of the iceberg.
90% is below the water.
Right. And so it's just cleaning all that up, as much of that as possible.
Okay. Yeah. Anything else you would like to add? Anything you'd like to tell our audience? I think we're getting ready to wrap it up, but anything else you'd like to say?
I agree. And I think acknowledging and understanding that all of that trauma and the templates and the imprints and the experiences, all of that are gifts. They're gifts.
Yeah.
They're opportunities.
Opportunities to up level.
There are opportunities to up level, and they're gifts.
Eat a new devil and get to the level above that. There's no greatness without adversity.
Right. And so coming to the appreciation, the gratitude for all of my experiences is absolutely part of that process. And to recognize, wow, all that helped me become who I am today, and have compassion for those that impacted my life in a positive and negative way.
Yeah. So we do have some comments. I want to get to these comments, and then I think we'll wrap things up. But Mike Horton, Mike's been a regular watcher of the show. Thank you, Mike. He thinks the problem with current treatment for depression is they're only looking at the symptoms, but not the deeper causes. In many cases, absolutely. It's a chemical imbalance, but why is there imbalance? And what's interesting is on 2 days ago, I showed some studies where the whole basis of the antidepressants was depressed people have lower serotonin levels than normal, and that's causing depression because of this chemical imbalance. So we're giving you selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors to allow your brain to absorb more serotonin to fix that issue. And I showed these meta studies, which are compiling data from all the studies about the link between serotonin and depression. And what this meta study published in a mainstream peer-reviewed journal showed is there's actually no evidence of depressed people having lower than normal serotonin levels. Their serotonin is actually pretty normal. And so this whole chemical imbalance theory that is the basis for Prozac and all these other antidepressants is bullshit. It's mainstream science now. This is why they're now pushing ketamine and psychedelics, which admittedly work better, is because there have been settled studies coming out saying your antidepressants are marginally effective or not even effective at all. So the whole chemical imbalance theory, now I think there could be chemical imbalances, and that, yeah, why is there an imbalance? There's other stuff going on. Don't just look at the brain, look at the whole body, look at the childhood, look at everything. But that study with regards to the it wasn't even a theory. It wasn't even experimentally proven. The whole point for modern antidepressants since the 90s has been chemical imbalance with regards to serotonin. And the latest science has proven that is bullshit. It's not. It's that particular chemical imbalance is actually not true.
I would add one thing to that. Well, a couple things. Number one, check out the placebo effect when it comes to depression. There are controlled groups that get a placebo, and they have, I believe, a higher success rate than the actual drugs. Also, the microbiome in the gut. They found a connection between depression and the microbiome, 100%. The diet, the food, the water. When so many times people change what they eat, it
all helps.
Their moods. They have allergies that they're not aware of to certain foods that trigger depression. I think the conversation is much bigger than just the drugs that the pharmaceuticals sell.
100%. Mike Horton also says, excellent point, Teresa. It's great to be grateful. I look at gratitude as abundance mindset. And the more pleasure we attach to anything, the more our brain helps us pursue it and get it. Mm-hmm. If you're grateful for what you have, guess what? You're feeling good about what you had. Your brain's going to lead you to get more. Do you have any comments on gratitude, Teresa?
No, you said it. It just, coming to a place where you're just grateful for your history, your background, your ancestors, your parents, like all of it. Like just understanding it's just part of a bigger plan. And when we're in the middle of pain, it's very, very difficult to be grateful. But
when you're feeling the pain, if you're able and willing, if you know how to release it and you're willing, that's where you need to be. Because when you're connected to that pain, that's actually an opportunity to get out of you.
Right.
Yeah. So
thank you, Mike.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Great comments. Wow, some of these concepts you thought of before, never heard of. That's why we're doing this show. This stuff is underexposed, especially, InnerMasculine. Teresa's coming on this show every week because men and women each have their own unique perspectives. I appreciate Teresa's perspectives very much. This is a channel to help men. Ladies, you're welcome to watch. It'll help you too. But in this, so-called manosphere, this online community of men trying to up-level, these concepts are just no one. John MLD, who I'm very tight with, we're working on projects, partnering together. He's big on inner game. Paul Apex Mindset, big on inner game, of course. But besides that, there's not that many people who are really getting this word out. And I'm getting the word out now. Teresa's getting the word out now because this has helped us. And we see it massively helping other people. Almost everyone I have on my show has been a person who's been at a low place, who's used these techniques, transformed, and is doing way better now. They're all testimonials that this works. Pretty much everyone on my show. So we're getting the word out. You know, that's why I'm doing this 5 days a week, Tuesday through Saturday now. And you are welcome, Mike. Keep coming back, sir. So,
I love the feedback. That's so beautiful. I love the feedback. It's so beautiful to get that confirmation.
Yeah, amazing. So, any final words for our audience, Teresa?
No, thank you, Ryan, for all you do. And I know the show is called InnerMasculine. I'm all about up-leveling men and women, all of us, every single one of us. We all, you know, when we level one up, we level everyone up. What's that saying with a rising tide?
Lifts all boats, 100%.
Right.
And I want to lift all men and all women too. Men and women are different. So the reason this is InnerMasculine is it's catered. I think it's important to specialize to a degree. You can have a general channel, just helps everyone. But I think there is benefit in having a channel that deals with men-specific issues, having a channel that deals with female-specific issues. There is benefit to specializing, but I don't intend to, for the rest of my life, only help men. I think there's value in helping everyone,
Absolutely.
men and women, 100%.
Absolutely. And thank you,
because
Ryan.
men and women are connected, whether you like it or not.
Yes,
So,
we are.
And I actually, for the most part, I like it. For the most part, not always. I'm just playing. All right. Anything else, Teresa?
No, thank you so much, Ryan. So enjoyed being on the show with you.
On. All right, onward and upward. That's our show for today, guys. Thanks for coming and allowing us to share these concepts with you. Not only what is trauma, but what is generational trauma, and also, you know, what are the concepts we need to look at, and how can we heal it? So keep coming back, guys, and just remember, you have more power than you know.